Welcome to the Theology Brewers, a Christian podcast featuring two brothers, one Presbyterian and one Baptist, a whole lot of theology, and a bunch of sibling rivalry. Enjoy.
Welcome to Theology Brewers. We hope that you were able to survive our first episode. If you're listening to this, you obviously did. So we are going to talk today about everyone's favorite topic ever. In fact, everybody wakes up in the morning saying, you know what, there's this one topic that I absolutely have to just think about and talk about today. I wonder how I'm going to get my fix on this topic. And that's ecclesiology. So, Seth, why don't you define for us what ecclesiology actually is?
You want the Webster's dictionary definition?
No, I don't care what Webster says.
Oh, well, I mean,
everybody thinks Webster's is the holy Bible of.
It doesn't have to be Webster's.
If
I were going to define it, I would define it as like the structure. Well, I mean, technically, ecclesiology is the study of church.
Well, that was hard.
Do you want to go into the Greek?
Do you need
the roots of the words? It's the theology of the church. Well, no,
I need a new co-host.
It pertains. I mean, what we're actually going to be talking about, it pertains to like church structure and would then bleed over into church function. So, I mean, it's not just. Yeah. So, I mean, practically speaking, what we're going to be discussing is church structure and into function in the following episodes, more than likely as well. This was requested. Yeah. So
specifically, ecclesiology is the study of the church. We're going to be studying or talking about briefly a certain aspect of ecclesiology, which would be church polity, church structure. How is it set up? This was requested on the Facebook page. So we'll give it a swing. Our goal too in this video podcasting too, we don't want to give you another hour-long podcast. No. Nobody wants to listen to us talk
ramble for an hour. No.
Well, nobody wants to listen to us talk probably in general. However, for an hour, and we understand that people's time is short and limited. So if need be, we'll do multiple episodes of topics instead of like making these long episodes that we want you to be able to listen to these on your commute kind of. So with that being said, I'm a Presbyterian. Seth's Reformed Baptist. However, we will talk a little bit about the common Baptist or independent church or non-denominational church structure too, because Seth's a weird Baptist. There's not a lot of Baptists like his.
I'm not weird. I might be a little weird, but so yeah, my church is set up, which I would say is biblical, is not what most people have as their church set up, and we'll get into that when we start discussing. Right. Yeah, for Baptist or even modern evangelicals. I didn't mean that as a knock necessarily. Yeah, it wasn't a knock. Baptist, you have your church set up very differently than most Baptist churches. Right, and that's because we're confessional Baptist.
I'm sorry. We should clarify that too. When we say Baptist church, we're using that as a cover-all term for any church that does practice paedo-baptism or infant baptism, because Baptists are the only ones that don't do that. That's why they're Baptists, is because their whole point of a Baptist theology is that you only baptize.
Stemmed from, but now, like, okay, so for example, your Christian Missionary Alliance, that's going to fall under, if we're just saying general Baptist. I know you're not Baptist. Some of you actually take aversion to being called Baptist or being associated with Baptists because your theology is not necessarily. Anyway, in practice, you practice believers' baptism, so and EV-free churches and all of that kind of thing. If you're not Methodist, Lutheran, Catholic, or Presbyterian, Anglican, or what's the I'm missing
everything
one.
Pretty
Eastern
much
Orthodox,
Episcopalian.
Yeah,
pretty much if you're any denomination outside of North America.
Yeah, pretty much. So yeah, we might accidentally not list you, and that's not a slight to you. That's just because we're discussing.
Right.
Mainly, it's going to be paedo-baptism, and baptism is going to be the main difference there.
Right. So non-denominationals, independents, fundamentals, CMAs, Southern Baptists for the most part, any other Baptists. I don't know what other.
Oh, there it is.
what other denominations are there that aren't?
What do you mean?
I don't know. It doesn't really matter. Anyway, we'll talk about those various church structures and why I'm a Presbyterian.
Mm-hmm.
Even though Seth and I agree on a fundamental level, at the local church level, we have disagreements about hierarchy,
Right.
and larger church structure. Maybe actually, I don't know.
They are
More
minor. They're minor. We'll get
Well, when I've talked to you before about this, you agree a little more with my position than your.
I see benefits of your position, but I don't necessarily. Let's just say I don't think it's anti-biblical, but I don't necessarily think that it's the only right way to do it. We'll put it that way.
Oh, okay. Well, that's fair.
Yeah.
So why don't yours is going to be simpler.
Mm-hmm.
So start off with how your church or how you believe as a Reformed Baptist, a church government and authority structure should run.
Okay. So like my church, and I would think that we adhere to the 1689. So I would think that, shaking my camera. Sorry. I would think that we are close to what the 1689 talks about, which is taken, our beliefs that it's taken from scripture. So in Timothy, it talks about.
Wait.
You want me to read what the confession says?
No.
Oh.
Define what the 1689 is real quick.
Oh, yeah. So the 1689 London Baptist Confession of Faith is what Reformed or particular Baptists hold on to. It was written by the particular Baptists in the 17th century, and it is basically just a very detailed, large, long statement of faith about our theology and what we believe Scripture teaches, what it says. And it was kind of in response to the Presbyterians. We came, and this actually has to do with church polity, we kind of came out of the Congregationalists who came out of the Presbyterians. So we're, as much as some Baptists would like to think that we would like, that some Baptists would like to be able to draw a line straight back to John the Baptist. Anyway, we can't. We came out of the Reformation, and we are Protestant by theology, by our history, whether some people would like to admit that or not. That's the truth. We originally had very close to theology to the Congregationalists, the Presbyterians, and it's still very close, but there are some big differences, and that's part of what spurred this podcast.
That's why the 1689 London Baptist Confession that wasn't written in 1689 says. Continue.
Yes, it wasn't written in 1689. It was published in 1689. Sorry. There was an earlier one in 1640 something.
It doesn't matter.
But it doesn't matter that much. And it was
we'll
a lot
get to
shorter.
Creeds and Confessions another time.
Yeah, we'll get more detailed. So basically, this is just basically what we use as our church's statement of faith is what it is. And so as far as church structure goes, we are elder-led. We have a plurality of elders. I mean, our church is very small. So in all reality, we have two elders, my pastor and our second elder. And then we vote on things as a congregation as well. So the elders lead us, but it's not like they are our rulers and they, crack whips and micromanage everything. We have a treasurer, and actually I think that's about the only other office we have, because we are so small. There's 10 members, including the pastor and his wife. There's also about 10 kids. So yeah, small church. But we believe that plurality of elders, and then you have your deacons as a separate office. They're not the same thing. Timothy makes that very clear, actually. And so plurality of elders. We are elder-led because Scripture talks about having more than one elder, and their job is to shepherd the people of God, and they're supposed to help. The idea that one main pastor is supposed to do it all is completely, in my opinion, unbiblical. It's not there. So you're supposed to have a plurality of elders helping each other lead and hold people accountable, hold each other accountable. And then you also have multiple elders that you can take problems to. Like, so if you're having problems, you might be closer with one elder than another one, but their job is to help guide you and disciple you, etc. And that's pretty much our church structure. It's very simple.
Yeah. So, I mean, in summary, your church is run by a group of ordained men who feel called to shepherd the flock and take care of their spiritual welfare.
Right. I need to clarify one thing. He's technically not a full-on elder. He would be an elder candidate. He's working on going through class stuff to become, I believe he's pursuing ordained to be an elder, or he's technically an elder candidate at the moment.
Well, so that's a cool thing too, is you guys, at least in your church, are have high requirements for elders.
Right.
Not just any Joe Schmo can be like the head pastor can be like, okay, you're an elder now, and be like,
exactly. And the pastor doesn't necessarily appoint them like just bam, I want you, and I want you. That wouldn't be, I don't believe that's how we would do that if we grow and get more elders. I believe that, it would have to be this candidacy thing where they have to become educated, they have to study, and then I would imagine the congregation would have some sort of say in that, because the congregation, the elders work cohesively, or at least that's the goal. So it's not like congregation led and they decide absolutely everything. It's not the elders decide absolutely everything. It's a combined.
You had like a week and a half to do work on this project. Did you not ask your pastor how you guys make elders, like nominate elders?
I actually didn't specifically ask him. I talked to him about ecclesiology, but I literally did not ask him the entire process for becoming an elder because it did not cross my mind.
Why would you ask your pastor about how your church is run? That just seems silly.
Well, I talked about how our church was run with him, and I talked about it when I became a member. Like, we have a membership covenant and this kind of stuff.
Who can I ask in my church?
I asked him about ecclesiology. I asked about church structure. I didn't ask him specifically about how we would go about doing elders. However, I can say this. It's probably something similar to what Joe Thorne's church does.
That means nothing to...
That means nothing to
all I know is that Jimmy is never going to be...
No. You haven't listened to Dr. Debo for a while.
No, I know I have. I know he has
been
now,
for like a couple months.
5 years. It seemed like...
Oh, it was a long time.
I know that you guys will never listen to this, Joe and Jimmy, but man, I felt bad for you. Almost.
The episode where he was finally he came on, he was ordained. It was kind of funny. It was a good episode. If you guys, that's Doctrine and Devotion. If you guys are wondering, go check out their podcast. They're both Reformed Baptist, Redeemer Fellowship Church in St. Charles, Illinois. Good podcast.
All right, let's jump into the Presbyterian one.
Yeah. Tell us about you. Well, not you, your church structure.
So similar in structure at the local level. So the local congregation actually elects their elders. So that's taken from Acts, where Peter says, choose from among yourselves, people, and that's how they did their deacons too. But what's important to know,
we do it. Just throwing
yeah, that's how you do it. There's what's important to note though is it's not the people that are over top of the process, right? So the apostles actually then confirm these guys, basically. Mm-hmm. So they're voted on, then they have to be kind of confirmed there. So at the local level, Presbyterian Church has let me clarify what the PCA has, the largest conservative Presbyterian denomination. We're different than the mainstream PCUSA. We are a ground up structure, which we believe is more biblical. So we align with the Baptists on that. It starts at the local church. Whereas your main lines like Methodist and Episcopal and PCUSA, they start at the top down. It's like in the Methodist church, the Methodist denomination owns the properties of their churches and things like that. The local churches in our denomination, whatever financial arrangement they've made out with that property, like our church rents from a Methodist church, a nice, beautiful old chapel building, church building. So the elders are elected. So we have, that's the short version. They're elected. That's your local elder. The elders at your local church are called a session.
Okay.
So they're called the session and they handle all the business of the local church. But there's 2 types of elders. There's ruling elders and teaching elders. And this is an important distinction. Although that we see the word presbyteros used interchangeably throughout Timothy and a lot of the passages that we get on how to structure our churches, we do see that there's a distinction that seems to be used in Timothy 3, that there's an overseer, specific, like a specific type of bishop or elder that is an overseer. And that's where we get the distinction between a ruling elder and a teaching elder. So the ruling elders are members of the local congregation, and they help do administrative ruling, if that makes sense. Like they're kind of the guardians, if you will, of the local church and things like that. So they're definitely shepherds, they're definitely spiritual overseers, but they a lot of them are working in other vocations, and they do the elder thing at the church because they feel called to that, but they're not paid to do that, a lot of them. Some churches are able to, some don't. Yeah. So like in our church, we have 2 ruling elders, we have 2 teaching elders, and the head pastor, the senior teaching elder, he's not allowed to vote on things unless it's
really
like a tie break, because like the session needs to determine stuff. He has just as much say, but in the vote thing, he doesn't vote unless there's a tie, which I don't think we can have a tie because we have an odd number of elders without him being counted. So what's important to note too in our structure is teaching elders, they're actually the main teaching elder is not actually a member of our church, a member of our specific church. He's actually a member of the Presbyterian. So Presbyterians believe that the universal church is not only the individuals that make up the church, it's also the institution of the church itself. So Baptists believe in a local church, and its autonomy, local church autonomy. It's a government unto itself, kind of, and that is that's its institution. You guys would understand the universality of the church to be all the people who believe, all people who call upon Christ as their Savior. Right. That's the universal church. However, we believe the universal church also is institutional. So, and the way we would, the way that manifests in a Presbyterian church is you have your local church with your elders, then the head teaching elder is actually a member of the Presbyterian, set up like a court system. And we get a lot of this from the Old Testament, how we see when Moses, his father-in-law comes to him and says, listen, get elders from the people to help you judge, to help you do these things. So we take a lot of parallels from the Old Testament in our understanding of how elders are to work in the New Testament as well. So
that's interesting. I didn't actually know that. I didn't know that.
We'll drop some resource stuff too at the end of this. I actually was listening to a couple of things from Reformed Theological Seminary on ecclesiology and stuff, and there's some really good lectures on there just to help brush up on this, and they cover other parts of this. But anyway, I'm sorry, I'm not being concise enough. Local church, then we have the Presbytery, which is made up of all the teaching elders and some of the ruling elders in our area. We're broken up into regions geographically. And so it's a court system. If you have, let's say you have a problem at your local church and you appeal to your elders and you're still not able to reach a resolution, then you go to the Presbyterian. The Presbyterian then handles things. But then from that level, it then goes to the General Assembly. So annually, as many of the teaching elders and certain amount of the ruling elders, as many as can come to the General Assembly, where issues are voted on and talked about. The business of the church is being done, which is fantastic. You have that many people of God gathered in a place worried about his church, even in the nitty-gritty administrative level. However, this also provides a large level of accountability amongst pastors, because our teaching elder, our head teaching elder, and our assistant teaching elder, our pastors, since they're members of our presbytery, that body meets together quarterly. They have a worship service together and they talk. And if there's to become an elder, a teaching elder in our denomination, for the most part, you have to have a master's degree in typically an MDiv, which is like 100 some odd credit, well, 80 to 100 some odd credit master's. You have to be very educated. You then have to go through this long process of going through the examining committee, getting questioned, writing paper, all this stuff. And then you have to come before the presbytery and answer questions from them, to all of them. So it's a very long and rigorous process, and obviously that's not perfect because things.
So you're saying that Spurgeon wouldn't have been allowed to preach?
No. It's by and large. We definitely make exceptions,
right?
For people that are educated. Like we're not.
Well,
it's
he
not
had no formal education.
Yeah, which is somewhere the vast majority of people. Spurgeon would
he
have
also read
he
several
wouldn't have been a
books,
Presbyterian. He definitely wouldn't have been a Presbyterian.
He wasn't going to be Presbyterian. I was just throwing out there. If he was, you guys wouldn't let him preach.
Yeah, we would. Because we have Baptists come and preach at our churches, like as guest speakers. Like we have no problem. That's the wonderful thing about, like, we also believe in the universal church in the sense of like any believer, right? So like who we let come to communion, right? As long as you're a believer in good standing of a local church, like, hey, come. We don't have our church only communion. That's silly.
Right. And see, that's something that we also agree on, our church as well. Like if you came to our church, you were baptized properly. But if someone, for example, my pastor used R.C. Sproul as an example. He said that if R.C. Sproul came to our church, and obviously he's sadly no longer with us, but if he had come to our church, we wouldn't have withheld communion from him because he's very much so a member of the body of Christ.
Yeah,
and
so
to
that's
do
interesting
so
for
would
you
be
guys, though. Well, this is a side topic. That's interesting.
We'll get into that when we start discussing the sacraments.
You should let people come to the table who aren't baptized. That's just a thing there. But I'm glad you guys do.
There's difference.
Consistent. But here or there. The only thing in addition I want to say is because it sounds all great and whatever, but where's this in the Bible? So in Acts 15, we go to that a lot. That's the Jerusalem Council passage. So we see that there's a debate, a problem at Antioch. I think it's at Antioch, right? And they're talking about circumcision and should believers now be circumcised like the Jews were. And here's the thing. Paul, as an apostle, has authority, right? Couldn't Paul have just said, no, don't do this. You don't need to be circumcised to be part of the new covenant. But he doesn't do that. They come to Jerusalem, have a church council, and talk about these things and rule and judge. And there's nobody that's over top. Like James is the contra Catholicism and others. James is the ruling guy over that proceeding, but he's not an authority. He's the moderator. Because after they debated and talked about it for a while, James says, okay, here's the thing. So we also see the churches supporting each other. And this it's not just a loose affiliation or working together. It seems to be a governmental structure of these churches working together in the New Testament. And there's a lot of passages that you can look up for this, Acts 15 especially. But I want in Acts 9:31, the singular word ecclesia, church, refers to all of Judea, Galilee, and Samaria, right? So if you go through Acts, there's a lot of reason to think that grammatically we're seeing that these churches are counted as one church body in the institutionally, not as like one church, many campuses, but like they have their own elders, and because Paul tells Timothy to appoint elders and bishops, right? Like there seems to be a governmental connection between them as well, not just local autonomy, and there's anyway, we believe, and Seth would agree with me here, that elders, their primary responsibility is the spiritual well-being. We get this from Acts again, where the apostles are just overwhelmed with taking care of the physical needs and the spiritual. And they're like, whoa, slow down, stop. Appoint deacons to take care of the physical needs. That's the role of a deacon. I know a lot of Baptist churches that the deacons and elders are the same thing, and that's just not
right. Well, and too with that, the traditional American church, I've seen some that even have multiple pastors. They have like a board of pastors, but they won't use the term elder. What the thing is, in reality, they actually have a plurality of elders. But I've also seen some who have no elders. It's the pastor, and then you have deacons, and the deacons fulfill the role of the elders. But that's not how it's supposed to be. 1 Timothy 3 goes through the qualifications. It starts for overseers, and this would be elders. It goes through a list of qualifications, and they have a very high standard of what they're supposed to be. And then you have a completely and totally separate list of qualifications for deacons, right?
Yep,
and so they are not the same office, and they should not be the same office.
Right. So here's another thing. People balk against the idea, especially in America, the independence fundamentals, the e-frees, even like the people, they balk against this idea of an institutional church sometimes. Like, well, it's just the people that are the church. And that's true. But here's the thing. Christ instituted the church as an organization, as an institution as well. And so if God's the one that established something, you probably shouldn't, bash it. That's his bride. Obviously, we make up the church, but there is an institutional structure because the Bible says so.
So question.
There's deacons. These are offices of the Bible. Yeah.
So could you say
of the church
that you guys view your structure there? Would you say that you guys are trying to maintain the visible church as one large entity, right? Like one.
Yes, actually, okay. Great way to say that, because there's an article that we'll post in the show notes here that it says that the Presbyterian idea is that the universal visible church is the goal of ecclesiology, right?
Right. So, okay. And yeah, I can see that in your guys' structure there. And so I want to read. So the Baptist confession that I mentioned earlier, the very first line in the chapter on the church, and this is actually one of the longer chapters in here because it is obviously something very important. But what it says is the Catholic, and that's with a small c, so that means universal. And actually clarifies the Catholic or universal church, which with respect to the internal work of the Spirit and truth of grace may be called invisible, consists of the whole number of the elect. Okay, the whole number of believers, obviously, that have been, are, or shall be gathered into one under Christ, the head thereof, and is the spouse, the body, and the fullness of him that fills all in all. And that comes from Hebrews 12:23, Colossians 1:18, Ephesians 1:10 and 22 to 23, and Ephesians 5:23, 27, 32. So there is the invisible universal church, which he mentioned, and there's the visible church, which I just mentioned, as the Presbyterians are trying to maintain one unified visible church.
Yes,
structure like that.
So one other thing real quick as to what elders are. So we believe in apostolic succession as well, but not in the same way that Catholics and Orthodox do, right?
Yeah.
The apostles were given the keys to the kingdom, but there was only one set of apostles, those 12.
Right.
From there on, the keys of the kingdom are given to the pastors and elders in those. And we get that from Paul and Timothy, and there's a whole bunch of things we could go into on that. But again, I'll post this article on Presbyterianism. Seth will have something he'll post on, well, we'll put it in the show notes on Baptist. We'll also throw in congregationalism, which I want to just define real quick. Congregationalism is that the congregation votes on everything. So the congregation has the authority in the system. So the pastors preach and teach, but any church discipline issues or finance decisions or things like that, they're voted on by the people. So there are some advantages to that model, but I just don't think it's the biblical model. And that's what's important. And we both agree on elder rule
led
model. So we've talked about this. We want to keep it elder rule, I would say. But
well, you guys might be, but see, that's where we have that mix of the congregation and the elder led. So it's a little bit.
Well, our congregation votes on some things and stuff.
Right.
Like we have.
But yeah, we would classify it as elder led. But yeah, it's a cohesive working together. Neither one is.
How old are you?
Say what?
How old are you?
26.
No, 26.
Yep.
You still can't grow a beard?
No, this is it. Honestly, actually, this gets longer, but it's nasty when it's longer. So
you are not reformed.
I can't grow one.
You're not reformed. You have to have a beard to be reformed, I'm told.
So I've heard, but there are people who wouldn't say I'm reformed anyway, just because I'm a Baptist. So particular Baptists unite. Anyway, well, yeah, I think that kind of sums up our time frame for this episode. But so the next one will obviously be continuing. We'll be getting more into detail probably about specific church function. So we'll get into the sacraments / ordinances, whatever term you prefer, don't care. Yeah. Baptism, Lord's Supper.
That's what we're doing next? I didn't think that's what we were doing.
It's leading. Well, yeah, because the next question was the centrality of like the sermon being preached, and that falls.
That's right. That
falls under
Dylan Black,
right.
a guy I went to school with actually.
Yeah.
He asked that. So we need to talk about the centrality of preaching, and that's a Protestant thing.
Right, and that is going to fall into how church
differ. Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. If you want to understand why Protestants are different than Catholics and Eastern Orthodox and other groups out there too that are quote higher church functions, although us Presbyterians are kind of like middle church.
Yeah,
we have a higher liturgy, but anyway, as to why that's important. That'll be a good thing to talk about. We'll do that in part 2. But hey, check out our Facebook page, our YouTube page. We'll have the podcast up, Twitter. Shoot questions at us. Shoot emails at us. Our email, I actually don't think I put that in the show notes last time. I'll have to go back and fix it. But it's Theology Brewers @gmail.com. I don't think the 42 is there. I think it's Theology Brewers. You think I would know our email, right? Well, I'll have it in the show notes. So ask questions, check us out, share, whatever, we'd like to just be able to continue this more and have more interaction and feedback with the audience. So hopefully we didn't bore you guys too much. We gave you a good starter, hopefully a good overview of things.
Yeah, and if you want to study this topic, which I highly recommend doing, read Acts, read Timothy, 1st, 2nd Timothy, read Titus. Those 4 books very much so deal with this exact topic.
If you can't grow hair on your face, why don't you grow it on your head?
Because it's called balance. Must maintain balance. I like it this way, so I do what I want. Oh, but yeah, so hope you guys enjoyed the new scenery. I actually moved my entire office and everything. I have my bookshelf there, 2 bookshelves. So this one is like fiction and books that I don't consider very good. Those are all my good books directly behind me there, my multiple study Bibles and whatnot. Yeah, I can't read his lips, but whatever. And I have Star Wars posters. Everyone cares.
Are those cereal box posters?
Actually, no. It was a big old poster calendar, actually. It was. But it was for 2006.
Oh, yeah. That's right. You told me about that. I actually did that with
2006 ended a long time ago. Man, we're getting old. Wow.
Yeah.
Anyway. Oh, and I highly recommend look up, just for your guys' information, if you don't know what it is, look up the Westminster Confession of Faith. Look up the 1689 Baptist Confession of Faith. Just read through them. They're worth reading. And then you'll understand kind of some of where we're coming from. And then when we reference it, you'll have a little bit of an idea.
You really only need the Westminster Confession. The London Baptist was just like copy. And as you know, when you copy things, it's typically not as good as the original. Which is
right. See, we copied and got a better grade.
Yeah, it's called cheating, and it's never morally correct. And you didn't. That's wrong. Who gave you the better grade? The devil. That was harsh. That was
extremely harsh.
Just kidding. Not very nice.
Presbyterians taking cheap shots all day long.
Well, we take it where we can get it. So
you need all the help you can get, pretty much.
All right. Well,
we should go.
You enjoyed this episode. Again, hit us up on our social media platforms, and we'll try to go into more detail. Seth's better at responding to things than I am, to be honest, but I will also.
Yeah, hopefully.
Definitely check out the webpage, though. We have a lot of stuff on there, mostly because it was my webpage before, and we've converted it to ours.
And we actually are going to start blogging.
Yes, we will. I have a lot. I need to go back through and edit my articles because it's been over years that I've written those. So
and your theology has morphed.
But I've got a lot of lessons and stuff and lectures or things I've taught on too that may be beneficial, maybe not. I don't know. That are on the website there too. So anyway, thanks for listening.
The one topic you did. Did you do a systematic theology topic?
Ruined my ending. No, I did biblical theology.
Biblical theology topic. That's a good one to listen to. Yeah.
I do talk about the differences. I did a couple topics within biblical theology, which is kind of ironic when you're doing biblical theology topically, but we'll get to that someday too. Anyway, have a good one, everyone. God bless, and we'll talk to you later.
Later.
End of line.